Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith, Photography the Great. Today we're going to be taking a look at Sony's new Alpha 7 and Alpha 7R. Initially I was going to do separate videos for both these cameras, but since they're practically twins I decided to do it all in one video. Both these cameras though do bring about a lot of changes, and so it's going to take me a couple of videos to go through all this with you guys. So definitely be sure to subscribe, and that way you get all the latest updates. With that being said though, taking a look at the A7 first here, this camera is basically, it's almost an identical twin to the A7R. Now there is a little bit of a difference in build quality. This camera is partially metal and partially plastic, whereas the A7R is an entirely metal-bodied camera. They both have weather sealing, and really in picking up both of them side by side, they both feel solid enough. You'd be hard-pressed to tell that they're made of different materials in different spots. Looking on the inside of these cameras, the A7 is a 24 megapixel sensor that does have an optical low-pass filter, and this camera shoots at 5 frames per second. The A7R is 36 megapixels without a low-pass filter, and because of the extra data it has to push around, that takes it down to 4 frames a second. So, as you guys know, I'm not really the sports and action photographer type, but it is important to note that, of course, both cameras are a little bit different speeds. The thing that I found most interesting about the sensors of these cameras is not the difference in megapixels or the difference in having an optical low-pass filter versus not having one. The biggest difference is that the A7, the A7R, in having higher resolution, that higher resolution comes with the price in other areas of the camera. So when we start looking at the focus system on these two, the A7 actually has the better autofocus system. This camera uses a hybrid focus system. It uses phase detect sensors and it uses contrast detect, and so it actually has, at least on paper, the better autofocus system. The A7R, having to have more pixels on the center, there's apparently not as much real estate for Sony to be able to incorporate those extra sensors for phase detect, so it's stuck with the contrast detect type system. This is not something that I can really provide a whole lot of feedback with at this time, but as I should with both these cameras, I'm going to be making future videos to update you guys about that also. Let's see here. So, oh yes, the compromises are not over yet. On most all of the Sony mirrorless cameras, you have what's called an electronic second curtain. And so basically what happens is, instead of the shutter making 4 different moves, it only has to make 2, because half of the shutter cycle ends up being done electronically. On the A7R, it actually doesn't have an electronic secondary curtain. That process actually happens mechanically just like it does on any other DSLR. And so that affects things like our flash sync speed. The A7 can do up to 1/250th of a second flash sync, whereas the A7R is limited to 1/60th of a second. And of course this is something else that I'll be testing in the future. So yeah, aside from those differences, both these cameras are pretty much the same. I believe that one is slightly heavier than the other, but when you consider that these cameras are going to deliver image quality that's going to be on par with the 5D Mark III or a D800, the slight difference between weight between the two models is not going to be something that's going to be a very, very big deal at all. And a lot of these things here I'm going to be talking with you guys about in future videos when we look at the cameras up close. Let's see here. Oh yes, so now we go on to lenses. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. This is something that I had to spend a lot of time researching. Of course, in Sony's lineup, as you know, we have E-mount lenses for mirrorless cameras, and then we have A-mount lenses for Sony's full-size DSLRs. The thing that gets interesting about this, about either of these cameras, is the fact that with them being full-frame sensors that use an E-mount, they actually have to have a completely different type of lens. For these cameras, Sony came out with new lenses that are called FE lenses, and basically they're just E-mount lenses that are full frame. Alongside this camera, Sony announced a few different lenses. They announced this 28-70, which is what I have mounted on the A7 right now. And this is basically the A7's kit lens. It's a variable aperture lens. Nothing terribly special. But they also released a new Zeiss lens called the 24-70 f4. They released a G-series Sony lens called the 70-200 f4. And they also released two Zeiss primes, the 35mm f2.8 and the 55mm f1.8. Back when we looked at the Sony NEX7, you guys may remember that we looked at Sony's LAE2 adapter, which is an adapter that allows you to take a full-size A-mount lens and mount it on a mirrorless body. This is something that I hadn't thought about before, but after getting this camera, I was so excited. I got it out of the box, and I popped on Sony's LAE2 adapter, and I put on a like a 85mm 1.4 Zeiss lens. And to my dismay, I was not getting the full resolution. But as it turns out, even that adapter has had to be updated to support a full-frame E-mount camera. So Sony, they also have a new adapter coming out called the LAE4 that pretty much works like the LAE2, except it supports the new full-frame E-mount cameras. So this is also something that we'll be looking at in the future. So far though, I've got to say guys, I really like both these cameras. If I didn't have to carry around large cameras like a D700 and D600 and 800 and such, I wouldn't. If I could get that type of image quality out of a much smaller body, I most certainly would. And that's exactly what cameras like the A7 and A7R give you. They give you the latest in terms of video capabilities and image quality, but they give it to you in a very small body. So that's something that I like. The only downside really that I can see so far is the fact that anytime you take a camera, particularly a camera that you put all the latest technology into, like Wi-Fi and a full-frame sensor and a high-tech electronic viewfinder, you take all that, you put it in a small body, well, you have to go to a smaller battery. And so unfortunately, that is something that is not particularly good on either of these cameras, and that's the battery life. You're looking at about 350 or so shots on Sony's FW50 battery. Now, this is not something that I can really fault Sony too much for, because whenever you put a smaller battery into something electronic, especially something that's very high-tech and electronic, you're going to have less battery life. The only thing that I am going to fault Sony for is they give you a truly crappy charger with this camera, well, with both these cameras. Sony, they do make a standalone charger for their NP-FW50 battery, but unfortunately they don't supply it with this camera. With these cameras you get a charger that is USB based. So you have your very high-tech, cutting-edge mirrorless camera, and then you plug it in and charge it like your iPhone, and it takes like 5 hours. I just don't know what they were thinking with that. Fortunately though, the problem is solved fairly easily. You can get a couple of extra batteries, and you can spend $50 and buy Sony's charger that they should have included with these cameras to begin with, and problem is solved. But yeah, I don't know why they did that. But all in all, so far my experiences with both these cameras has been really good, and I'm looking forward to doing more shooting. In the next video, we're going to take a closer look at both these cameras in detail, and I'm going to go ahead and put some sample photos that I shot in the description of this video. Adobe has just come out with their latest RAW converter 8.3 that supports the RAW files for both these cameras. So as always, I converted the RAW files at the default settings in Lightroom 5, and I'm going to put the link down in the description so you guys can take a look at that. Definitely be sure to subscribe, and that way you will see all the updated videos that I'll be making very soon on both these cameras. And definitely write me in the comments below, because if there's anything you'd like to see in the next part of this video on both these cameras, then I can provide you with more feedback in those areas. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, Photog Did Great, signing off.